our Smart Kitchen Summit, and I really like the fact that Mike Wolf called this a summit, because it's so much more than a conference. It's really just a meeting of really smart people discussing ideas, and we've seen a lot of that just during the networking break and all throughout the morning. And the smartness is only going to get ratcheted up here a ton in our next. I should have quantified that. We're gonna ratchet up the smarts to 11 here for our next speaker. He's Mr. Johnny Gray of Johnny Gray Studios. He's a kitchen designer. He's also a visiting professor of design and kitchen culture. He wanted to make sure I got that because it's not just kitchen, it's kitchen culture. It's everything around the kitchen. And this is him right here. How awesome is that? He's already here.
Hey, can you hear me, guys?
There you go. Please give a warm round of applause for Mr. Johnny Gray.
Well, thank you, everybody, and really great to see such a big crowd. I'm going to take you and kind of gallop through kitchen design, and I hope I'll set a kind of context for you in all your thoughts of the day, and I hope to have some good discussions with you later over lunch and after we finish. So I thought I was being a bit naughty here, stealing your kind of title. The Disrupted Kitchen was how it started, and then I thought, well, I talked to my son Felix, who's studying economics, and he said disrupting is more interesting because this is happening to both the kitchen, and the kitchen is doing it to other rooms in the house, doing it to how we live. So, you guys think you own disruption. Well, I like this picture of the Sex Pistols, and I thought you'd appreciate it because it was a kind of interesting time. It was a kind of political protest. It was actually a complete scam. It was a guy called Malcolm McLaren behind it, who was very good at marketing. Didn't last very long, but it did loosen people up. And why I put the kind of picture in, by the way, apologies everybody, if you could have a screen near you, this presentation is very visual. Being a designer, I thought that's kind of what I could offer you. So there's kind of pleasure in disruption as well as danger, quite exciting, a bit of anarchy. And we're in a very, very interesting stage right now. Let's have another slide. And I started my kitchen design career off just at this very time. In fact, my first project was a kind of gothic punk kitchen. The visuals are too awful to show you, so I thought I'd show you something else. This is a wonderful picture from Blade Runner, okay? This was the original set, and these visuals have just been sold in Bonhams in London for thousands of pounds. Now, I don't know if anybody wants to speculate on this, but what the hell are they going to be cooking in that kitchen? Something to do with steam, to do with pills? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it would be a very nice place to anyway live, but it's a kind of an example of exactly the kind of kitchen that I'm not talking about. Okay. So it's being disrupted and we're disrupting. There's a huge change going on in the home. And I'm on this kind of speaking tour of the West Coast at the moment. The kind of title of my new thesis is The Kitchen Instinct. I suspect, it's another slide. Here we go. I suspect that some of you may have come across this guy, Richard Wrangham. Anybody read Catching Fire, How Cooking Made Us Human? Put up your hand. Okay, just a few of you. Really good starting point, and great thing for all of us involved in the world of kitchens. Basically, we would not have the bodies and the brains, we would not be the species that we know, Homo sapiens, unless we could cook. And interestingly enough, it's not inevitable that we actually were able to cook, because you need a safe environment to do so. And it has all sorts of knock-on effects. Being able to cook not only gives us more energy to be able to think, but also it created pair bonding. Anyway, it's a fascinating account. And what's really great is it gives a foundation, a really solid foundation to what we do. So, I don't know whether any of you can see the screens, but I'll just read some of these off. What I've noticed over 20 years, and by the way, my background is in architecture. I trained as an architect. Is I've noticed how the kitchen is gobbling up the activities from other rooms. And this is really accelerating. I mean, I know we've got open plan on this list here. I haven't got it on the list, but it's part of this. We've got gender equality. We've got this extraordinary uber role of food. I think as we live in a more unsafe world, we turn to food more and more. It's not just for nurturing ourselves after difficult days or good days. It's also, there's a new thing happening. There's a kind of transcendence going on. People are sort of ecstatic about food, and people have even written about that. And then, of course, there's family living patterns. I helped bring up 4 kids, and I made arrangements to be able to have a studio in the grounds of our garden. I wanted to be around for them. And we used our kitchen to basically to live with our kids, and I'll show you a little picture later. So, how did I start? Well, my first sort of disruptive influence was something in Britain I call the unfitted kitchen. And this is the idea of making a kitchen with furniture as opposed to units and continuous counters, but with one big difference. Unlike a traditional farmhouse kitchen, it's all about really, really good but quite submerged and hidden ergonomics. Not in your face kitchens, but you go into a kitchen, it looks a bit like a living room, and actually you can cook really well. And I licensed it to Smallbone in 1986, and it came out here in 1990. And I think I hit a kind of zeitgeist. It was sort of something that people really wanted. They wanted to take back ownership of their kitchens from these so-called hygienic, super efficient, well-advertised, I think, very bland kitchens. And it made me, I still am a bit of a radical. I still don't really like very fitted kitchens. I like something where I can really feel at home, where my customers and clients can really feel at home, and where it works for the architecture. Let's keep moving. Okay, I thought you'd be amused by this. My daughter grew up watching Friends, and the fascinating thing about this Friends, and I often wonder, where does all this influence start? They never cooked. Did you ever see them cooking? Am I wrong? Okay. And you can see they're much more interested in playing games. Behavior over style. So, being a Brit, I had to show you this lovely slide. This is, of course, the Holy Grail. Monty Python, flying off to find the Holy Grail. And what makes me really engaged as a designer is something I've written here, which is basically emotion, translating emotion or translating design into emotion is kind of my Holy Grail. And by the way, I think it's probably everybody in this room's Holy Grail too. Okay, so let's just talk architecture for a second. And these figures, I'm sorry, I can't verify. There's not enough information. But from my sense of being around the kitchen world for 35 years, I reckon the kitchen's at least doubled in size, possibly more, in the majority of homes. But what's interesting is the culinary space has not actually changed very much. In fact, we like to keep it tight. It works more efficiently in terms of the ergonomics. All the rest of the space has gone where? Gone into social use, okay? And it's happening more and more. So, sorry, I'm just going to go back one. Back? Yeah, here we go. This is a title that I start to disrupt my clients' thinking when I start to negotiate a new project. The living room in which you cook. I think it's quite a helpful kind of tagline. I did a tour of Australia and New Zealand a few years back entitled Sociability and Sanctuary in the Kitchen. So we're talking about rooms having emotional definitions rather than kind of use definitions. Okay. So this is to give you just a little bit of fun. Okay, so Richard Layard is a very cool economist and sociologist, professor at the LSE in London. And he got his students to do some research. And they looked into all the activities that they reckoned were the most important part of our daily lives. And if you look at this rather charming list, you can do all of them, except for the bottom one, commuting, in your kitchen. At the same time, yeah, exactly. So now this one, this chart, I want to tell you, we are actually quite a bad point for me to give a talk to you right now. We're deteriorating a bit on our happiness levels. So they computed all these things together, and they found out, and it's very interesting, and we probably all know this, but it's worth redefining it. If we're sliding right down, so we're just starting here now, but in the afternoon, the people who give the talk at sort of, 3 o'clock are going to have a very bad time. But as the afternoon goes up, we get a little bit better. But what's really wonderful is that, of course, we feel happiest from about 6 onwards. And where are we likely to be? Well, if I was in England, I'd say in the pub. Here, I'm not sure what I'd say. I don't want to say a restaurant. I want to say in your kitchen. I learnt, I was looking for ways of measuring the impact of what I do. And all we really had till about 10 years ago was feng shui, which I kind of find problematic. But we have this new tool, and almost every university now has a neuroscience department. Put up your hand. Does everybody know the definition of neuroscience? I assume they do. No? Yes? But basically a kind of way of looking at instinct. I was in communication with a wonderful man called John Seisel, who wrote the first book on how you measure design. And if you're interested in having a copy, it's called Inquiry by Design, and there's a new copy, new edition out. Probably worth having in your library. Not a great read, but valuable read. Okay? So just jumping a little bit to kind of give you a full story. If you shut your eyes for a second, and I want you to remember something you did say, 2 years ago, something really nice. Okay, now, I'm not going to ask anybody because the audience is too big, but I'm guessing, and you can put up your hand if you agree with this, that where you went was you were able to access that by actually the place where you had the memory. Would everybody agree with that? So walls record memories for all sorts of reasons. Next slide. Sorry, it's got a very slightly bit out of sequence, but neuroscientists measure things or talk about hardwired needs. So when you read about their stuff in the papers or in magazines, this is what, they're kind of what really, same as almost interchangeable with the word instinct. But the particularly important ones are, and this is a random list, there are plenty more of them, is people's faces. And I've noticed already in the panels this morning, people have talked about music and dance, all the things we can connect up. And they're right. Sunlight, sociability, long views, food smells, all that kind of thing. And they're all happening in the kitchen too. So just a little bit of starting to move it in a bit more personal stuff for a second. Ghosts in the room. There are some ghosts in the room, and they're really intriguing. And probably all of you kind of know what it is, but in my case, it was my mum. She was quite a fragile person. Next slide. And here she is. She bought a small cottage in the South Downs in England when I was 5. And this is her, I think, when I was 6 in 1966. And she's standing outside the cottage door. She's whistling, which people don't do very much anymore. But I think it's a really wonderful sign when people whistle. They're in another world. They're happy. And next to it, can we just go back one? Is a kitchen that I built for her when I was 14. So my kitchen instinct started rather young. And I did it for her. And I think in a way, this would apply to all of us in the room. It was a safe place. It was where our mother was. And of course, it was a place of kind of sociability and all that kind of thing. So there's deep roots here. And I just wanted to show you 2 lovely visuals, one of which I'm sure you know is from the Lord of the Rings Shire House. And one of them is that wonderful illustrations from Wind in the Willows. And I've always wanted to be in one of those kitchens, always wanted to be in those spaces. And there are plenty of reasons for that. Let's do it. So why do kitchens go deep? Well, the smell and taste is linked to the hippocampus. You probably all know this, which is a site of long-term memory, which is what I was talking about earlier. Sorry, can we, maybe I pressed the wrong button here. I'm doing something. Let's just go back one more. Touch and sight is less extreme, the memories, but because they're filtered by the thalamus. And of course, food and sociability are so intertwined, particularly because of our body's circadian rhythms. 2 hours before lunch or thereabouts, our bodies or our stomachs are preparing ready for the food and expectation. We can't avoid eating, as it were. Okay. So the history of kitchen disruptions. I just want to remind you of this list. This is a pretty obvious one, but it's big what's happened. Electricity changed the kitchen. I think America took ownership of kitchen design probably in the 1900s. At least that's what I wrote in my first book, The Art of Kitchen Design. And I'm not saying it owns it right now as such, but I think that was a very big traumatic change, and a wonderful change, of course. Continuous cabinetry, well, when that came in the 50s, after the war, big time, it swept away all other ideas about kitchen design. In particular, it harnessed, I realize this is controversial, it harnessed the idea of hygiene. I think people were made to think their kitchens were dirty. And along with all the other advertising going on at the time, soap powders and so on, probably very clever because people felt compelled to change their kitchens. The standardization of appliances was a big change. Central heating is very big news because you don't need to have small rooms anymore. And right now, I think we're in the most extraordinary time. I don't know how to describe this, and perhaps all of you can enlighten me, or we can discuss it. There is no name to use for the way that these devices are taking over our connection or interconnectivity between work, life, leisure, the outside world, and also our kind of emotional kind of balance. And we find ourselves sitting around our kitchen table after dinner, 5 or 6 of us, with our laptops. And we do it together, but we are definitely wired. Okay. So my sort of discovery was, as I was saying, that furniture is a great design tool. And I spent the last 20 years trying to explore ways in which I can make the kitchen a more emotionally intelligent space. And it's partly through using furniture as a design tool. Now, instinct-based design is where I'm at right now. This is the idea of the kitchen instinct. And these are some of the ways that I analyze and use space. And I'll show you a plan very briefly before we go into our dream sequence. So I discover a sweet spot. There's always a spot in the room where you're in the kind of command position. And if it's at all possible, we plan kitchens so we have a view of the people coming into the room, a long view into the garden, because we know from neuroscience how important that is. I talk about eye contact, very interested in sociability, not at all keen on people cooking facing the wall. I know it's sometimes quite difficult, but you cannot have a conversation with anybody if they're behind you. It's impossible. And also, you're much more alert in the wrong way to sounds that are behind you. Peripheral vision plays a big role in how we design central islands. If you see sharp corners in the middle of the room, it triggers off your fight and flight response mechanism. Even if it's on a small level, it still makes a difference. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. This is a room with only really one wall there. The rest is a glass house. It's a kind of pavilion. And so I thought I'd show you this because it's instructive. What do you do? Well, in this particular case, I've created this sort of big wooden pantry just here. And I've literally bent a kind of curved island around it with dishwasher facing sort of partly so it can be loaded from the table. Nice big food bar. One of the biggest changes in kitchen design in the last 10 years has been huge extension of what used to be called a breakfast bar into a sort of food serving bar. And then a nice place to prepare food. And a relatively tight culinary circle. Let's go to the next slide. So what's influenced me a bit with kitchen design in terms of the core thing, which is ergonomics. I got very ill after I had a lot of publicity. I had too much work. I couldn't cope. And I went to see this person who taught the Alexander technique. My body was starting to collapse. And I developed a whole theory of movement around this. And basically, your teacher asks you to observe yourself doing two things. And I watched myself doing my teeth, and I was using almost every muscle in my body. And then I watched myself cooking, and I realized I was cooking all over the place. Long counters are confusing. So I like the idea of doing something much more focused than that. And I call this dedicated work surfaces. So you minimize the amount of area where people can cook. And it becomes a subliminal process. They just go there to do this. And you load your tools and your various activities around those points. And what this does is it means that you can compact the culinary zone, and you can have the rest of the space to do other things in, to do your sociable activities. So I now want to show you some pictures about how I feel I've disrupted the kitchen. So I'm going to leave the music to do the work. love to have talked you through the details. All the projects have wonderful stories, but we need to get through this. So you can probably tell I design kitchens for some quite wealthy people, but I also have a great passion for working for ordinary people, and I like communicating my ideas. And this is a recent idea. When I see kind of the whole talk about millennials and talk about hipsters, and we've just sold our very first kitchen on this theme. And this is the idea of breaking the kitchen down, not just into furniture, but into emotional components. And I'm calling it the casual kitchen. As you can see, it's got things made of concrete. It's got things that are they're casually placed. And it'll be very good for appliances that can be replaced easily. There's a big move towards freestanding appliances, which everybody knows are often very cheaper to manufacture. So anyway, this is an idea I'm exploring right now. Let's do the next slide. As you can tell, I'm a great lover of the artisan world. I used to be a furniture maker myself. I used to run an antique business while I was studying architecture. The wood on this counter here is usually thrown away, just burned. They're just offcuts. There's a whole wonderful Japanese tradition of making things by hand called wahi-sabi. I've called it rough lux. And the role of imperfection, particularly in a highly manufactured kitchen, I think gives a lot of resonance, a lot of emotional engagement. Next slide. This is the most recent project, also in parallel, I call Spine Island. I've noticed that, and I've always had a reluctance to create anything too shallow because food would fall off it. But in fact, I now notice that our families are often having maybe 3 or 4 people in the kitchen at the same time, and they have a laptop in between, say, preparation surfaces. So if you stretch it out thin, really interesting, kind of makes a chance for you to have intermingle food with other kinds of social activity. And here's one I just sold to a client in Falmouth in Cornwall. This is their last kitchen, they tell me. And I'm involved in a massive research program in the UK with 3 universities to see how we can design the 3-generational kitchen, which we shortened to 3G. And I thought I'd put this lovely little anecdote in. I don't know whether any of you know now, but with increased life expectancy, each one of us in this room, each one of us everywhere, living in the West, can expect an extra 5 hours of life. So we're really going to be in our kitchens for a very long time. And we have to find ways of holding people in their kitchens, because the very last thing that happens before you go into a residential home is when you can't cook for yourself, which I think is very moving. It's a real task for us to do. And governments are starting to engage. The British and the American governments are already exploring a program of joint research, which I hope to elaborate on next time I come. Next slide. So what can we do, guys, together? Intelligent furniture is my kind of thoughts. It's an old idea I had 15 years ago, which I developed with Maytag and Genair, which didn't really, for various reasons, didn't go very far. I do think furniture can talk well. I mean, I made a little list here of things like techno tables. Has anybody seen what IKEA's been up to? Smart table, quite extraordinary, worth Googling. Central Islands are undeveloped yet and unproductionized. I'd like to explore that with anybody in the room who's interested. In fact, Dacre and I are already having discussions. Hydroponic chambers, well, growing our own food in the kitchen, obviously happening, but can it happen really effectively? Let's go to the next slide. This is my own little contribution. This is what I call a light dresser, or in American, it's a lamp hutch. This is basically a great big lampshade, but it's also a place where you can store food. And it's a project I did with Corian, 12mm thick Corian, packed with LEDs. And we've now developed a new version whereby the shelves here are also have light strips which relate to SAD syndrome. So you can switch it on, automate it twice a day, and people who live in the Northern Hemisphere can perhaps address some of their issues with SAD syndrome. Okay, next one. So just a little bit for you guys, because I know you're all really foodies. I think we're going through this very interesting phase where we have the end of the 3-course meal. New York Times critic Adam Gopnik wrote a book called The Table Comes First, where he explores basically the story of French food. Really great book, but he explains how the 3-course meal is an artifice. It was created around the time of the French Revolution. If you go back to, say, England in the 16th and 17th centuries, we didn't just have this idea of a starter, a main course, and a dessert. We mix it up, just like Middle Eastern food does today, or Spanish food with tapas. Of course, we're in the role now of personalized meals and diets, absolutely massive. In our household, we've got 2 vegans, 1 vegetarian, and I call myself a flexitarian. I'll leave you to work out what that is. Lunch standing up is quite nice. As long as you have sociability, that's my bottom line. So it's fine if you stand up. So Lots of meze on top of your raised height bar. Very pleasant. Everybody can choose the amount of food they want to eat and what they want to eat. Shopping for 2 days, well, we've all seen what's going on in Britain. It's really big. The big supermarkets are closing down, and they're turning basically themselves into neighborhood store chains. Hobby cooking, we've been touched on by the panels already. To me, it's one of the best forms of relaxing, the best forms of creativity. And we're denuded of a chance for creativity in our houses. We live very neatly, we live very tidily. The only room we really make a mess in is the kitchen. Let's keep it that way. Next slide. So here's a bit of fun for you. This, embarrassing I have to say, is my own kitchen. This is my daughter at Christmas time. Peak traffic, okay? Not a surface in sight is available. And does everybody complain? No. We kind of learn almost to move like someone's choreographing us. And sometimes we even play quite loud music when we don't even talk. And it's a kind of, this thing I was telling you about, transcendent. It's a wonderful moment for us as a family. So clutter is really good, and it's been justified by psychologists. Visible signs of family life and accommodating activities, really important in the kitchen. I don't envy these kitchens you see in magazines where you never see anything really going on. It's all too sleek and clean. Let's have some clutter. Next slide. So how about a bit of magic clutter? Everybody know where this is from? Harry Potter. So Dursley's kitchen. Who would like to have a meal in there? Everybody? Very chaotic, but great fun. So maybe this is a sort of instinct by going back to behaving a bit like a real kitchen. Okay, next slide. So just beginning to sum up now, emotionally intelligent kitchen. How can we give you a few little nuggets of where we can go next? 2 tables, really good, because people are using the kitchen as a studio or an office. And it's boring to have to clear the food off the table every time, or one or the other. Flexible islands, like I've talked to you, lots of moving parts to support people who need different uses. Perching, really important. You go into kitchens so often, and you don't know where to be to have a conversation. You move, you shift, you lean, but you don't really belong anywhere. Really important to have that as a kind of welcoming moment. And then, as I said, views and eye contact are crucial too. Next slide. So, what is the kitchen now? I'm not really sure, and I think it's shifting sands. I think we all feel that in this room. And I've titled it really as a kind of, it's potentially going to be the house's brain. Everything seems to be, all the social activities of the house seem to be moving towards it. So I've started a bit of wordplay just to start us all off. Super hallways, transient lounge, home shop, a space with no name, alcoves, health clinic, home cafe, internet classroom, security, long lunches, big sofa, music, garden views. That describes the kind of kitchen for me a bit. Next slide. So, all rooms sort of lead to and from the kitchen, and I just wanted to show you this. This was the project I've been working on for 18 months in Wimbledon, in London. It's the longest bit of concrete I've ever made. It's something like 6 meters long, and it's in the shape of a giant's tongue. You see, I've got Harry Potter on the brain. But this is all about this idea of thin and long to distribute activity. Next slide. So, is there a possibility we could all somehow collaborate? This is my 5th talk on the West Coast, and I put this proposition to each group. Maybe we need a kind of Wikipedia kind of style of research here. My job as visiting professor is to liaise with industry, with all the stakeholders in the kitchen, with designers, with many different aspects of kitchen culture. And I'd like to think we could, first of all, in a way, I think we might as well just get on with it and just say, we're going to be living in the future in kitchen houses. Or maybe not, but I'd like to certainly try and build some. I'd like to think about acknowledging the role of the kitchen in architectural terms, but also in smart terms, and also as a collaborative project. We all need we can all benefit from this extraordinary disruption that's going on. And thank you very much for listening.